So welcome. I am smiling because, first of all, thank you for taking the time to join for today. The last session I did just a couple hours ago was for 1,700 people. And after this, I have another one for 5,000 people. So the dynamics with just 6, 7 of us on the call is going to be very much more interactive. So it'd be great if you can switch your cameras on. I fully appreciate if you don't want to for whatever reasons, but if you're able to, it would be great to see you. Let me just get rid of the clock. Just give me one moment if you don't mind before we kick off. All right, here we go. So thank you for taking the time to join. It's going to be my pleasure to share with you what is happening in DBS Bank. And the presentation, here we go, is 3 years of work of interviewing, researching, and collaborating with DBS Bank that I'm going to summarize into 60 minutes or less. So we're going to cover a few things. Before we go into the briefing, let me just welcome you. Some of the names I can see are members, there's 1 or 2 are not. So let me introduce the Institute, the Strategy Implementation Institute. Antonio and myself found the Institute at the beginning of last year out of a passion to help leaders fill that missing gap that they've been taught how to plan, but not how to implement strategy. We're delighted, it's rapidly growing. We're up to a few hundred members now across many continents. And what we offer is an online course that takes 12 weeks and the opportunity to be certified as a strategy implementation professional. And as you can see on the screen, our purpose is to develop implementation professionals. And at the core of the Institute and the course is our strategy implementation roadmap. And you can see the 7 components that make up the roadmap on the outside circle, which are also the modules for the course. And in the inner circle are the 4 stages that fit under each of the modules. So for leadership, financial, business, whichever one, we take you through how to craft, embed, execute, and sustain. So the course is available. We discounted the rates during these tough times in appreciation of what is happening globally. And being part of the Institute is to join the family of implementation specialists around the world to better understand strategy, implementation, acquire the required skills, be certified by our partner APMG. And also, when you take the course, you receive the body of knowledge, which we'll be publishing early next year as an official book. Talking of books, I was delighted just 10 weeks ago to launch World's Best Bank, a strategic guide to digital transformation. And within 20 days, the book became a #1 bestseller on Amazon. We're already on the 3rd print run. Every day we're shipping out copies as well as coming in across obviously e-copies and Amazon. The book is also be announced next week. It's the CEO, Piyush, and myself, been nominated for a global award that will be announced next week. And just today, I was nominated the winner of the Business Strategy Award here in Singapore, where I live. So it's a delight to be with you. And what I'm going to take you through is a summary of not how DBS Bank, but how you transform from a traditional to a digitally driven organization based on the lessons from the bank. And one of the key lessons in digital, it's not about a product anymore, but a platform. So you can see on the screen on the side, we have various interactions that support digital transformation. And then here is our online course and certification at the Institute. For those not familiar with the bank, this is just a quick snapshot. And let me introduce you to the CEO, who's a gentleman called Piyush Gupta. And Piyush took over the running of the bank in 2009. And it became the first bank in the world to win simultaneously the most prestigious banking awards. Putting that straight in another language, it's like going to the Oscars and winning Best Director, Best Movie, and Best Actor. So this was a phenomenal success, not only the first bank in Asia, but the first bank globally to hold these 3 awards simultaneously. And Harvard, a couple of years ago, posted the top 20 business transformations of the last decade, and DBS came in at number 10. So this is Piyush and I when we were working on the book. And I'm just about to sit down with them again in 3 weeks to do a conference. We're both co-presenting. Piyush and I first met, we were both in Citigroup. I was regional VP on the corporate bank for Asia Pacific, and he was head of technology and operations. And over the years, we've been friends. And then when he took over at DBS, I started working with them there. So in 2014, I was very fortunately working with DBS and also with the largest luxury company in the world. And both of them were pivoting to digital. And I saw at the time that they were struggling with challenges that were not what we had seen before in strategy implementation. So we started to focus on why digital transformation was even tougher than traditional. And there's a few key reasons. For example, it's not just about transforming your organization, which is tough enough, but it's also about understanding which aspects of the new technologies are most important and how they translate and embed into your business to better serve the customer. Should you be focusing on blockchain? Should it be on AI, machine learning, coding, customer mapping, hackathons, design? There's so much happening that translating that into the business is what's the challenge. So for myself, I've been living in Singapore now for almost 30 years. Before that was Hong Kong. So Asia has very much been my working career. Singapore is home. Originally from Scotland. And today, as well as running the Institute, I also run a company called Bridges and another company called the Ticking Clock Guys, which provides a model for digital transformation. So our agenda for today is going to be 3 key areas. What does it take to get the technology right, the customer right, and the culture right? Now, let me just go back. So just admitting a couple more people. So during the presentation, happy to take questions as we go along. Happy for you to switch on the camera. As I mentioned at the start, my last session a couple hours ago was to 1,700 people, and I have one in 2 hours' time to 5,000 people. So the fact that we're a small group this evening for me in Singapore means we can interact, happy to take discussions and questions as we're going along. So here we go. Let's kick into the story. We're going to kick off in 2014. The leadership team in the bank had just implemented the first strategy under Piyush's stewardship, which was to be the Asian bank of choice in the new Asia. They wanted that sweet spot between international and local banks in Singapore, because 2/3 of the world's population is in Asia, and middle class was growing. Their goals of the strategy were to achieve by 2015, but as the leader said to me, we ticked the boxes by 2014. So the team were then looking at what next. And it was the perfect storm. We were just at the back end of the global financial crisis. So you've seen headlines like Lehman collapsing, day of reckoning on Wall Street, markets in disarray. People's attitude towards banks was terrible. The Times magazine actually showed that 74% of people prefer going to the dentist than visiting a branch. That's how bad banking was. And also in Asia, we felt even more and sooner the pressure of fintechs coming out of, so specifically in China. And there was a whole storm of fintechs coming out. And then the other part of the perfect storm was Piyush sat down with Jack Ma, who was then CEO of Alibaba and was just starting to roll out Ant Pay. And as Piyush explained to me in one of the meetings, he said, Jack Ma scared the bejesus out of me. So this was all happening around 2014. And the leadership team got together and discussed what to do. Also, the board recognized the shift that was happening in banking and the global landscape. And Peter Sia, the chairman, in the interview with him said, we felt that if we didn't lead the charge, frankly, we might die. And the leadership team the board gave the leadership team $200 million and said, go and bet on digital. The 200 million, which is in Sing dollars, so it's about 130 million US dollars, it wasn't linked to their performance, wasn't linked to a scorecard. It was literally to go and experiment. And in one of my interviews with Piyush, I said it was a lot of money. He looked at me and said, no, it's not, Robin. It was 20% of our annual technology budget. So even though for most of us, 200 million is a lot of money, for the bank, they were already seriously investing in the technology and digital. So the board said, go and experiment, see what's possible. So we're going to go into the digital wave. Excuse me. And we call it the digital wave in the bank, not the strategy, because they have three main initiatives under Piyush's stewardship. The first strategy was the Asia Bank of Choice, but they call it now the Asia Wave, because there were best practices, culture, customer improvements that flowed into the digital. And today, as much as they focus on digital, they're also now focusing on sustainability, and the two are not separate, but integrated. So they call it the digital wave and the sustainability wave. But for today, I'm going to focus on the digital wave. And the taxi drivers in Singapore are great fun. And, you know, the acronym DBS used to stand for damn bloody slow. Today, it stands for Digital Bank Singapore, which just shows you the transition. And for those who are not familiar, this is the skyline of Singapore. You can see DBS under their logo here. There are 187 banking institutions in Singapore alone. Most of them are in this picture frame. Okay, so the challenge for the leaders was, how do we stand out? How do we change? And in their meeting, one of the leaders said, well, most people find banking painful. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, let's go, to the bank, let's do our banking. And as they were chatting, someone said, well, if it's painful, let's make it joyful. And out of that thought came the strategy. Technology was, I'll come back to the image, technology was going to provide the opportunity to make banking invisible. So instead of getting in your car, going down to the branch, finding a parking space, finding a form in the branch to fill in, finding a pen that worked, standing in line, getting to the counter, doing your transaction, and then reversing all the way home. Of course, now you do it on your phone. So the leaders 7 years ago, 2014, already recognized the opportunity in the bank. And the image here is what we call strategy on a page, which those who have done the course, the strategy implementation professional course, will start to be familiar with. And this is a new addition. Currently, Antonio and I are updating the course, and I have added these slides into the course. So the members, you'll get a copy of this in the members page that we're going to add next month. So you can see here the 5 pillars. This was all about Asian focus, embracing a digital world. The picture behind is the skyline of Singapore, and red and white are the bank's colors. So let me share with you Piyush's thoughts on the new strategy, the digital wave. Oh, sorry. Let me, sorry.
In your view, what the bank of the future resembles? Well, I believe that every industry increasingly is a technology industry. Software is eating everything. And that's true to banking as well. So effectively, I think a bank of the future is a technology company that offers financial services, as opposed to a bank that has technology somewhere in the background. And the reason this is important is because technology is changing the customer experience in every single facet of our life. Exactly as your smartphone and your apps allow you to get music differently, or buy something differently, or get a cab differently. It allows you to fulfill your financial expectations differently. And frankly, in the future, I think you'll get to a stage where you will not even know that you're acquiring financial services. I call it making the bank invisible. And if you can make the bank invisible, the banking service will be so seamlessly embedded in what you really want to do with your life, that you will take and procure the financial services without knowing that you're doing that. And technology will make all of that possible.
So this was the opportunity, that technology was going to change the way we do banking. So how do you execute a digital strategy? There were 3 components that I gave in the agenda. Becoming digital to the core, which is all about the technology, embedding ourselves in the customer journey, which is about making the bank invisible, and creating a 30,000 startup. And I put that in intentionally to show, I mean, initially it was 18,000. Now the bank has 30,000 employees because it's been growing so successfully. So here we go. I'm going to present each of the 3 areas, and then I'll stop after each one, and we can have a discussion or take any comments or questions. So what are typical challenges in creating the technology platform? For many companies, including DBS, it was about transforming from outsourcing to insourcing. So 90% of their technology was outsourced to 2 vendors. But the bank leaders recognized that they had to own and develop their own technology so they could change at speed. Now, you might be sitting there going, that makes sense. But there's another bank who I was working with last month whose leaders didn't insource the technology. And the vendor had a different vision of what the platform should be. And they almost ended up in court. So not only did it delay the whole transformation, it also derailed the leader's focus from where it needed to be on the transformation, rather than dealing with vendors and arguing about what they had paid for. So this was critical, that you control your own technology. Secondly, today, adopting cloud native is a given. 7 years ago, it was still relatively new. And cadence is the speed of development. So they dramatically accelerated the time. So previously, technology was a bottleneck, and you wanted something done, it went to a long list of 80, 100, 150 items, and they would get back to you in 6 to 12 months. That doesn't work in a digitally driven organization. How did they do it? So they focused on 4 blocks: to run, build, and manage their own technology, which I've talked about; to engineer their data centers based on Microsoft, Azure, and Amazon, AWS. So this was moving to the cloud. Using open source where they were able to, which was pivotal to enabling much faster development and deployment of apps. And the cadence, the increase in automation, you can see went up 8.5 times. Now, how do you get a bunch of bankers to think, though, more like techies, not just in the technology department, but across the whole bank? And this is something they did phenomenally well. They came up with a phrase that caught on. And the phrase is, what would Jeff do? And as you can see, this is Jeff Bezos from Amazon. And the phrase was to get bankers to think like techies. Now just pause and think about this for a moment. Changing the mindset of your employees to think more like techies is, of course, a major challenge. And this was very clever in getting the people to think different. But a phrase alone is not enough. It has to have the supporting structure. So they also visited tech companies in the West. And the head of technology on his way home back to Singapore was sitting on the airplane summarizing his learning. And he came up with the acronym Gandalf, which some of you will recognize as the wizard in Lord of the Rings. Now, why Gandalf? Because they visited Google, Amazon, Netflix, Apple, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And the impression of a wizard and using technology as a wizard summarized what they wanted. It also reinforced the key learning. And of course, why the D is DBS. It wants to be the digital bank. So from Google, they learned the importance of open source software to accelerate their cadence. Running on Amazon's cloud platforms. From Amazon, the importance of cloud. From Netflix, the importance of data and automation to scale and providing personalized recommendations. From Apple, the importance of design. From LinkedIn, the importance of community. And from Facebook, to be a collective. So Gandalf, again, anchored what needed to happen. So first key message is don't benchmark against the competition, benchmark against the world's best outside of your industry. If you benchmark against your industry competition, you're playing catch up. If you benchmark outside of your industry, you've got the opportunity to leapfrog. So this is Dave, the gentleman who created Gandalf. And even with Gandalf and the phrase, what would Jeff do? You still need the structure to transform your technology. And they came up with 5 key elements for the change. And you can see it here. Shift from projects to platforms. So shifting individual projects that needed approval, committees, took time, those 6 months, to operating as a platform where everybody was working simultaneously. Developing high-performing agile teams. So they adopted agile at scale. Today, we can now automate everything and testing through deployment to increase the cadence again. So everything becomes automated. Designing for modern systems, building the infrastructure, the engineering business op teams to ensure they interact. And I'll talk more about that later. And organizing for success, building scalability into the system, ready for experimentation. And this was the core structure that allowed the bank to start to transform. So just a couple more slides on the technology. Today, the data center takes up 75% less space, but can support 10 times the growth of the business because they've moved to cloud. The other advantage of taking up 75% less space with data centers is they save $30 million a year in air conditioning bills. All right. And what's the focus today? To very much move to AI ops. AI is becoming, of course, the engine. So we move from people as the center and ops to AI driving the way businesses are run. So let me summarize, and then we'll open it up. What were the best practices for transforming from traditional? This one is so powerful. They wanted the biz and technology to be on an equal platform. So the phrase that caught on was 2 in a box, which meant tech is business and business is tech. In English, what did it mean? When Piyush, the CEO, was hosting a meeting, he could ask any of the business about technology and any of the technology heads about the business, and they had to be able to answer. So the technology and the business had the shared objectives and the shared measures. And this was very powerful in breaking down silos and getting an equal approach across the whole organization. What would Jeff do to change people's mindsets? Becoming cloud native, which is a given today. Benchmarking outside of your industry. Number 5 is remove toil. Toil is a term from Google in processes that don't add value, that take time, that diminish energy. So you want to take the toil out of your technology, automate everything, and digital is everyone's responsibility. So it wasn't a tech's responsibility or transformation team. Everybody was responsible for digital. So let me pause there. I was going to do breakouts because we had a few more people registered, but because we're a smaller group, happy to do this interactively. As I said, my next call is with 5,000 people. So it's great to be able to just have a chat. So let me open it up. I'm going to pause at this point. Comments, questions, or reactions? If you prefer, we can go into the breakouts, but my suggestion is we're a small group, so happy to take any questions you've got at this stage. Okay. Oh, sorry, let me just check the chat box. Can you really, Chris is asking, hi Chris, can you really automate everything? Does that make sense? Oh, yes. I can understand where you're coming from because, you know, I came out of the Six Sigma world when we were trying to get straight through processing and automation and everything, and it was so difficult. Today, with the, and I'll show you later on towards the end, yes, it's possible to automate everything. Does it make sense? Oh, it's the only way to operate now. The power of the automation or everything happening, it's just phenomenal. And you'll see the impact under the culture when I talk about contextual marketing. Thank you, Chris. Okay, so let me talk about customer. What were the key challenges many of you will relate to? How can we create a hassle-free customer experience, have the highest customer satisfaction scores, and build ecosystems? So these were three key challenges for the bank that many of you can relate to. The first key question under the customer is, what does digitalization mean to your customers? Now, earlier, I was working with one of the pharmaceutical companies, and for them, it's about looking at the patient journey end to end. In banks, it's about looking at the customer experience from the customer's point of view. Now, you might just think, yeah, go on. But this was a radical shift in the way banking was conducted globally. Banks have been notorious for developing the process and then forcing the customer into the process. Now, to be truly customer obsessed, they step back and they look at the key touch points between the customer and themselves. And the question has shifted from internally, what is the best way for us to work, to now asking, what is the best way for our customers? And that simple change in language is a very powerful driver in the approach. So for DBS, you can see in the orange, very frequent, they have transport, health, travel, shopping, entertainment, utilities, and then not so frequent are things like pension, education, buying a car, getting married. And they asked, how can we contextualize for the customer? So they moved very much from being a product focused to customer centric. Customers don't want a car loan. They wanted the car. So it's very much looking at being customer centric. And how do they do that? For DBS, customer journey mapping became the default way of working. So they map out not just the touch points, but the emotions, the feelings, the reactions of customers. So customer journey mapping is now embedded, and part of the mapping is understanding the job to be done. Now, this is becoming more and more common. So what do customers really want? As I said, customers don't want a car loan. They want the car. So it's really understanding the job to be done. I'm going to give you an example just for those who've maybe not come across the term before. You go into a shop to buy a drill, but it's not the drill you want, okay? It's because you need to make a hole to hang a picture. But the job to be done is not to make a hole. The job to be done is not even to hang the picture. It's to display a picture of your children to keep your mother-in-law happy. So the job to be done is keeping the mother-in-law happy. And when you understand your customer's job to be done, you're then much better at delivering what needs to be done and eliminating the pain points. Pain points are where customers just get so frustrated with you. So let me give you some examples from DBS. Before, about 6 years ago, as the technology was evolving, they had a hybrid solution, which was in the branches, there were long queues. So to eliminate the queues, they came up with a hybrid, which was SMS, text messages. So you used to go on your phone, text the branch, and they would send you a queue number and your expected time, which meant if you were in a shopping mall, you could go for a coffee, meet some friends, do some shopping. Well, 5 minutes before, you get a call, you go to the branch, and you wouldn't have to just stand around waiting. They also introduced video teller machines, which were the first in Singapore. So you didn't even need to go to the counter. So it looks like this. So if you needed, for example, to replace your ATM card, you could do it here. Initially, they put younger people on the screens, but they actually realized older staff were better because they were more used to doing things like Skype. And then another early success was the frustration of going to your ATM and it's run out of cash. And that happened on average every 3 months. The bank adopted predictive analytics. And by being able to then predict the customer flows, they now only have a cash out once every 55 years. Another critical part for the customer that many of you are familiar with is design thinking. Many people use the Stanford approach. DBS adopted the British Council one, which is called the 4Ds framework for them. And I've got a question coming up here in a moment. So of the 4 stages, where do you spend at least 50% of your time? Is it in discovery, which is about gathering and synthesizing your insights and inspirations? Is it about define, where you refine the opportunity and concepts? Is it about develop, where you experiment your minimum viable product? Or is it about delivery, where you're implementing your concept? So where do you reckon you spend 50% of your time? It is in discovery. It's about visiting the customer. How do you become customer obsessed? You don't assume what they want. You talk to them, you get their feelings, their emotions. And when you come back and share, you don't just say what they said, you say how they said it with the passion and the feelings. So at least 50% of your time is understanding and discovering around the customer. So design thinking was started to use across the bank. So along with the job to be done, for example, when it comes to mortgages, when you're internally focused, you're asking, how many mortgages have we sold this month? But when you're externally focused, you recognize that the customer wants to realize their dream home. And it changes the way you think and respond. Also, a critical part of being customer driven and using data was the ability of the bank. In banking, we call it cross-sell. For those non-bankers, you'll be familiar with this. You go and open a bank account, they say, would you like a credit card, madam or sir? Would you like a loan? Would you like, and you're offered other products. They're pushed onto you. Contextual marketing allows you to cross-buy, which is at the point of contact, they make recommendations. Now, you'll be familiar with this. When you've been on Amazon and you purchase a book, it shows you a bunch of books underneath that says other people bought these. And 1 in 5 people make a second purchase. This is then, what we call contextual marketing. And the bank very much shifted to that approach. The second part is, what does it mean to your employees? So we've looked at it from the customer point of view, but what does digitalization mean for the employees? And in different companies, obviously different things. In DBS, their focus in 2015 was to shift from building PowerPoints to building prototypes, to get out of asking permission, going up the ladder for approvals and budgets, to creating minimum viable products that they could push out, pilot, and test with their customers. And how they did that was with hackathons. So a hackathon is a 2-day get-together, not just with bankers, people in your company, but also entrepreneurs, coders, and they come together to solve a problem with a digital solution. So I'll just give you a quick sample.
I want our people to wake up to the new way that mankind lives, what digital means. And you can't do that in classrooms. You can't put people in front of a blackboard and teach them what digital is all about. The only way you can do it is through experiential learning. Now, this Megathon Hackathon, it's so exciting because it allows us to check many things in one go. It's a tremendous opportunity for us to get our best and brightest and give them a tremendously different exposure to the new digital world that is on us.
So that's just a little bit of a teaser. You could see that they were running these hackathons across the whole bank. So hackathons, they launched in 2015, and these became the driver for employees to participate in digitalization. So the key takeaway here is, what does digitalization mean to your employees? How can they participate? What do you want them to do? What is the action? So for DBS, hackathons showed the power of digitalizations. And in the very first hackathon, they came up with the idea or the concept of opening a branchless bank in India that was later named DigiBank and has been now rolled out in Indonesia. So just the very first hackathon alone was so successful, it started to convince the unconvinced. And the last part of the customer that I'll touch on today is on ecosystems. APIs, application program interfaces, are growing rapidly between organizations. It says 450. Now they have over 1,000 live APIs connecting with other organizations. Why? Because we work in a hyper-connected world, even during the pandemic. And you have to offer your customer the experience that they want. And you can do that by connecting with others. So today, as an example on DBS, you can buy and sell a car. Huh? Why would you buy and sell a car on a banking website? Because the bank recognized that people, especially in Singapore, because whatever you pay for your car, your tax is almost the same, which is a way we control the amount of cars on the road. So people need a loan. Previously, you were dependent on the salesperson in the car showroom to recommend DBS. But now they own the customer journey and they're able to build in the loan invisibly. So when you think you're buying a car, it will automatically tell you what loan you can get. Because they make it so easy, of course, it drives more business. So today, APIs have become a significant driver of growth, creating new value in two ways, because they offer customers a more embedded experience and they give us more data, which I've started to talk about, and you'll see more in a few minutes. So let me just close out on this. So the bank continues to expand. It has three model approach on ecosystems, and you either participate on an ecosystem, you orchestrate it, or you create a new one. All right. And for those who are interested in this, I've contributed to a new book. It's in my own book. And then I've also contributed to a new book coming out from Thinkers 50 next month, which is all about ecosystems. So if you're interested in that, just tune in to Thinkers 50. And I think that's coming out about 5 weeks from now. Just bring you right up to date. Just a few months ago, they launched the first cryptocurrency exchange in the bank. Okay. So let me pause again. What's your key takeaway? Okay. So any comments, questions, or reactions? Okay, thank you. Okay, so my biggest takeaway is implementing digitalization is increasing the number of employees as opposed to job loss. Oh, delighted to hear you say that. Thank you. All right, so let me move to the final section, which is on culture. One of the top 3 reasons digital transformation fails is because the culture cannot keep pace. So you've got to continue to transform your culture, continue to experiment, and the bank focused on creating the happiest workforce. So the first focus was the leaders very smartly asked, what's the biggest roadblock to our startup culture success? And they had this at their leadership meeting in 2015. And the answer? Meetings, ironically. They had too many meetings that took too long, that didn't start on time, that weren't adding value. So they introduced a meeting governance called Mojo. MO is meeting observer, meeting organizer, and JO is joyful observer. Now, what won't surprise you is the employees were given an app that provided the governance. So meeting organizers were told they had to be data-driven, have an agenda, start and finish on time, ensure equal share of voice, and summarize. What might surprise you is you can download Mojo, whatever phone platform you're using. So it's available to others. Now, Mojo was critical because it saved 500,000 employee hours, which means it freed up the time to take the right actions. And also, it encouraged people to speak up. So they increased the share of voice dramatically from 40 to 90%. Initially, it was paper-based with meetings and signage. Today, it's all digitally driven. And if a meeting organizer has too much negative feedback, they're actually banned for a period of time from organizing meetings. And they'll receive monthly digital nudges on how they can improve their performance. Another critical element of the culture is creating the right environment. Your environment controls your behavior. So if you're sitting in a silo with walls between you, the next person, never mind the next department, it breaks down communication. So the bank invested heavily in creating the joy spaces. And you can see, for example, in Hyderabad, they've actually mock train, and the audit team in Singapore used F1. So it really opened up the space that opened up the communications. And this was the main part, last part I'm going to present on, which is they used an approach called ABCDE. These were the 5 elements that created a startup culture. So I've worked with a few organizations and I've said to them, what do you mean a startup culture? And they kind of go, well, and they kind of head, what do we mean? They want to work fast with less bureaucracy and respond to customers quickly. How do you do that? Well, you need to be agile, not just in technology, but across the whole organization. Be a learning organization. C, customer obsessed, D, data driven, and E, experiment. So I've already mentioned this, but I want to reinforce it. Technology is business and business is technology was critical at becoming agile and breaking down the barriers. And their attitude was, customers don't see us as two departments, two divisions, but as one. Under learning, just as an example today, the AWS, Amazon, had a competition for machine learning that DBS participated in, and they were absolutely delighted that Ray Go of DBS beat the Amazon coders and came up with the fastest car. What it was a competition to develop machine learning for a race car around a track, and they could measure it in terms of speed. Another example in customer obsessed, you might, going a bit quick, you might have think, hang on, we just talked about customer. But the bank leaders wanted to reinforce that customer obsessed was critical internally as well as externally. Right? So for the consumer bank, they focused on design thinking, eliminating calls and branches and working with digital payments and striving for straight-through processing. I'll spend a little bit more time on data. Samir Gupta, who's the Chief Analytical Officer for the bank, talked about the challenge of becoming a data-first culture. And he said to me, Robin, the easy part is the analytics. I was like, huh? He said the biggest challenge was getting people to change the way they worked. And the attitude was better data, better decisions. So first of all, they built the culture and capability. They cleaned up 80 million incomplete records. They had to make decisions. If someone like myself has a couple of corporate accounts and a personal account, is that 3 customers or 1 customer? It was 1. So they had a lot of cleanup to do, your legacy data. Then they focused on making it usable. So they moved from the data from traditional warehouse to data lakes, which are much cheaper and better suited to less structured information. So data lakes allowed people to access, and they created a governance of who had access to what data, how it was used. And then they continue to build fit for purpose data platform. So today they employ around 1,000 data analysts, which includes names like titles like data scientist, analyst, data engineers. And just as a side, there are actually more engineers in the bank today than there are bankers. But the magic happens when you bring the data and the customer together. That's truly where the magic happens. Why? Well, here you can see it. Chris, you're asking about, can you really automate everything? Every step of the customer process is, going digital, is automated and is tracked. And by driving app optimization through path analysis and understanding consumer behavior against what the jobs to be done, they're able to track and recreate customer journeys to drive that contextual marketing. So this is an actual picture from the control center. I'm not going to have enough time to give you those examples. I'm just going to keep us on time with it. I want to share this one. It's not just about using data, it's data and intuition. So this was a fun. They did the analysis at one of their ATM banks in the west coast of Singapore, and they saw that most people were going to the left to do withdrawals and to the right to do deposits. And they analyzed it and they just couldn't work out what was going on until they visited and they saw the signage, which said withdrawals on the left, deposits on the right. Key takeaway from here is sometimes it's not just the data, you need intuition. So they changed the signage, which balanced out what was going on. And convincing bankers to take risk is not easy because we're trained not to mitigate risk, not to take it. So to do that, Paul Coben, who's head of the whole transformational journey, emphasizes how critical psychological safety is. And if you've not come across Amy Emerson's work from Harvard, well worth checking out. Psychological safety is the #1 factor, according to Google's Project Aristotle research, of the is the #1 factor for successful teams today. You've got to feel safe to try, experiment, and know you're going to be encouraged. So the motto becomes learn fast, learn forward. So learn from the mistake, don't keep doing it, and then learn and apply it to the next experiment. Okay. And the final example is Sparks. They created a mini Facebook and YouTube series that told the stories of corporate customers' success with the bank. And they last about 10 minutes. And there were, I think, about 6 or 9 episodes in each one. It's been tremendously successful, having millions of hits, made the bank cooler to the younger generation, attracted more customers and more employees to apply. So Sparks was a wonderful success story as an experiment. Okay, so let me just pause there. See if you've got any questions, please just put them into the chat box. I won't run through the 12 because I've covered, all the messages, but just as a summary, you can see how they ignited the strategy. And let me just close out so we finish on time. The biggest key message that came out of 2016 was that digital customers bring in twice the income. So this was very powerful, showing the results. Today, a digital customer creates more revenue to the top line than cost savings, because once you're on the platform, you do more business. Small, medium enterprise, SMEs, do between 16 to 60 more business because they're more comfortable. On the consumer side, one of the gentlemen on one of my presentations last week was sharing that his daughter moved over to the UK to study from Singapore. And because the bank recognized that he was doing regular monthly transfers, the bank gave him a reduction in the cost of transferring money that locked him in to do more business because he was so happy with the bank. So to close out, what next? When I asked Piyush, he said, oh, Robin, if you compare us to Alibaba in the East or Google in the West, we still have a lot of work to do. So they continue to spend almost $1 billion Singapore dollars, or about 650,000 US dollars. 650,000, yeah, 650, excuse me, $750,000 US dollars. I'll start that one again. $750 million US dollars a year in technology. There's a momentary loss there. Intelligent banking is very much coming through. Things like 5G contactless ATMs, and the new vision, because they're already the best bank in the world, is to be a better bank, the best bank in a better world. And sustainability is very much the focus. So people are no longer asking so much, what would Jeff do, but what would Piyush do? So thank you to everyone for your time. It's been a delight to share with you the story. For those interested in connecting who are not already, please do follow me on LinkedIn. I post every day a message on implementation. And for those who are not part of the Institute yet, please do join us. You can see the QR code, you can scan that, and that will give you the link to the website. So it's been a pleasure sharing with you the story The book is also available in whichever, 45,000 platforms across the world. Of course, I recommend it, but up to you. But I'd like to thank you for your time today. Stay safe, keep well, and I wish you all the best success going forward.